Hey everyone, welcome to The Big Picture with Africa Uncensored. I'm your host, Justine Wanda, and with me today in studio is...
Tom Wana.
Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today.
Asante, Justine.
And with us, we have a very important guest. He's an advocate and law lecturer and the editor-in-chief of the Platform for Law, Justice and Society, Kenya's leading socio-legal publication, Mr. Evans Ogada. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. It's good to be back here after a long while.
Yay. So before we get into our topic today, which is focusing mainly on the Katiba Art 15, I would like to share Africa Uncensored published an article that is about fueling the AGI hype. That's artificial general intelligence, the recruitment playbook to land big tech contracts. So apparently a lot of artificial intelligence companies are recruiting thousands of people, but not giving them actual jobs. And they're lying to anyone who has capital that they're making these big advancements in artificial intelligence when it's all hype. So you can check out that article, which was also supported by the Pulitzer Center. You can check it out on Africa Uncensored. It's called Fueling the AGI Hype, the Recruitment Playbook to Land Big Tech Contracts. So let's get into the show. So the Constitution is a teenager. It's 15 years old, and it's a teenager full of corruption pimples and raging, struggling to just get implemented, right? And my first question, just so we don't get into the doomerism of things, is what have we done right so far?
Well, this Constitution, in terms of its symbolism, has actually given capacity to so many people who could not have spoken before. I mean, we have to take pride in what we saw last year with the young people out in the streets, the so-called Gen Z protesters. That could not have happened in years gone by. We have the Constitution at Article 22-23 giving capacity to a number of people to go to court and seek help and remedies that could not have been there before. So from a symbolic, from a capacity point of view, the Constitution is standing out. We couldn't have, for example, envisaged that people will go to court and say, you're not going to excise Karura Forest. You have to involve people, public participation. So there are a lot of things that we can take pride in terms of this Constitution giving us capacity. We are more empowered under this Constitution to ask questions, to go to court, and to hold government to account.
Oh, okay. So shout out to the Constitution for being 15 and fighting, because one of the things that we've seen over the years is the establishment of implementation institutions, the first general election under the new Constitution in 2010, and the operationalization, English, even Peter, but how to get devolution working.
Yeah.
47 county governments are in place, and they have governors, senators, MCAs, and they're shaping Kenya's governance and fiscal infrastructure. We've seen the early tests of devolution, places it's been in conflict, people are in conflict with it, places where it's working, the nullification of the first presidential election, that was in 2017 by the then Supreme Court, led by CJ Maraga. And then in 2018, there was the BBI initiative, the whole handshake fiasco, and it was proposing a whole lot of constitutional amendments, and everyone who wanted to really, really uphold the Constitution was against it. And in 2021, the court struck down BBI. In 2020, I'm missing something, CJ Maraga had an advisory to dissolve parliament. That didn't end up being implemented because the 2/3 general has had not been upheld. There was an advisory to dissolve parliament, but it didn't happen because parliament apparently finds a way to survive regardless of what is the constitutional violations. And then in 2022 there was peaceful transition of power, and the Supreme Court upheld the election. There was now we're seeing the constitution being fought again by the term limits proposition by Senator Cherargei, who proposed a bill to extend the presidential term from 5 years to 7 years. That's already just a whole debacle on its own, but also trying to amend the constitution using an act of parliament when parliament itself is like in several pitfalls of not just failing the representation part of it, but also like not upholding the constitution in its entirety. For example, with the trying to entrench the NGCDF into the constitution. So that's where we're at right now. And with all this successes and setbacks that we've seen with the constitution, I'll ask you, Tom, first before I go to Evans. Like, what is a moment that you feel has given the constitution momentum that people have seen, or this is something that we can get behind?
It's, for me, it has to be the first time people saw an election being nullified, 2017.
Yes.
That was a huge moment for everyone because it was like, for the first time, the courts addressed, using the harshest terms possible, thievery of votes, like ballot stuffing or whatever happened during the elections. That for me was the moment that happened. And also throughout Maandamano, you've seen courts strike out, throw out charges on people. Rose Tunguru's charge was thrown out because there was no basis for even arresting her in the first place. And a bunch of other people who were arrested and LCK went to defend them.
Yeah.
That for me was when the constitution became that book that everyone rallies behind, and the courts at that time felt like they were actually doing what they needed to do. And all these other bills or acts of parliaments that were passed, or policy legislations or even policy recommendations from the executive that were struck down, one, because they were unpopular, and two, because people pointed out that there was no public participation and the court stood with the people. And that was in line with the constitution. For me, it has to be those, the moments when you saw the constitution shine through all the mess to represent the people.
Okay. So I love that you have like this positive outlook on the nullification and all these different ways that the court has upheld the constitution and stood with the people. But also on the flip side, we've seen massive failure of the people in government just not wanting to implement the constitution, or like bypassing it so that they can continue carrying on whatever agendas they have, not just for themselves, but for the people rallying around them, right? And I will ask you, do we really need 47 counties? One, because there's apparently a contention around it. My opinion is like we need all the counties to work. I think that's my opinion, but I would like to know from you, do we need all the 47 counties? And what are the major ways we are failing at implementing the constitution?
Well, my personal view, which has been consistent, is that we are spending a lot of resources in terms of pampering persons in public offices. And that is directly to answer your question that we don't need the 47 counties. We have counties there that repeatedly have failed to generate income to sustain themselves. They are consistently depending on stipend or income from the central government to even pay salaries. It's not sustainable. It's not viable. We need to revisit the numbers that had been proposed in the original Bomas draft, because if memory serves the viewers and the listeners well, 47 was a political compromise between the then NAK, Kibaki's political wing, and the NDP or LDP by Raila Odinga. So this was 47 was a political compromise by those politicians. The numbers that were proposed in Bomas were, I think, 14. And that would have made sense because it doesn't help us as a country that everything we are collecting is going towards paying salaries. Right now, you're seeing these politicians, and there is this move. I saw somewhere that every governor who's done 2 terms will be entitled to pension.
Yes.
This is our generation. We are young people here. It's our time to actively be involved in the civic affairs of this country. Yeah. When will you save and even buy a small shamba or do something out of your life? Our fathers keep on telling us, by the age of 20, I was building something. We can't do what they did because at least their disposable income was available. It was not burdened by this crazy taxation and looting. So we need to reduce the number of counties. We need to reduce the number of MPs. Italy did it in the year 2020? They had a referendum and reduced the number of representative units so as to basically discipline themselves fiscally. Yeah. We need to draw from such examples because our numbers in terms of representatives too high, the size of government is too big. We need to cut down on that. And again on corruption. Now, your second question, in terms of what are we doing in the wrong way in terms of this constitution? Number one, corruption. And our political culture. Those two have consistently been part of a negative culture that have seen to it that this constitution, the 264 articles, and the full tenor of this constitution is not realized. For the reason that you will find corruption in all spheres, all branches of government, corruption in courts, corruption in parliament. The president himself is moaning that corruption is a problem in parliament. The executive, Shif, we've been seeing all those stories. Which other one? This payment system.
Yeah,
e-Citizen. We keep on seeing stories about certain funds not being accountable. And you can clearly see that even with a constitutionally protected Office of Auditor General, and FCPA Gadungu has been doing quite some good job in terms of trying to do her bit as constitutionally required. You can see how politicians, the political culture, are running rings around her. So, corruption, our political culture, still a problem for us in terms of realizing the potential of this constitution.
I really want to push back on something just
yes.
If you say that the number of devolved units needs to be slashed, it's 47 now. 14 was a sweet spot that you've mentioned. My question is, this is a catch-22 situation, right? Where you reduce the wage bill, you reduce the size of government, and also potentially corruption in general. But then doesn't that disenfranchise a lot of Kenyans who feel represented by the 47 units?
Well, representative is both a political and a scientific question, because how you divide, for example, constituencies, it's supposed to involve some science to it. If we allowed this to questions of political expediency, where politicians and their supporters want to be represented, and look at the populism of such arguments, for example, with universities. Every kiosk, every Tom, Dick, and Harry wants to have a university. What has that done to the quality of education in the country? You may have all these people clamoring for representation and wanting to have token representation in terms of, I need an MP. It has to have a stop at some point. It has to be realistic. If it has to be guided by science. And that is why, for example, we have a problem right now Look at the parliament we have right now.
Yeah.
I'm very sure you and I don't know some of these MPs.
Yeah.
And some of them go in there and
Never say anything.
their contribution is horrible.
Yes.
I mean, I was watching a video of one yesterday who was struggling to basically speak in English. And this is a senator. I mean, we are joking. We are playing a lot. We just need, go to the parliaments of old, where we had people like Kanyona, Mutai, Ungare Madai. We had very powerful figures who did their job well. And the parliament was a little bit smaller. So we need to look at, is 47 really working for us? In terms of the economics, it's not. And it's putting us in a state of constant debt trap. And that will affect us in terms of sovereignty. We are forever going to be indebted to the Chinese, the Americans, the Europeans. We are not going to be sovereign, and we are not going to be free to decide on our matters freely. We need to reduce. We need to have our house in order, and then we can claim to be sovereign.
Okay. I really love that you put into perspective that we are getting into debt because of quote unquote hyper representation. So if you were to restructure, just like from your point of view, if you were to restructure the government as it stands, what's like an ideal number, or like what would good representation look like to achieve that kind of momentum towards less debt, less, just less trappings by the traditional sense of things?
I'll want to avoid what politicians do, which is guesswork.
Okay.
Let us have a scientific conversation with actuarial scientists, with the IEBC, and let us have hard conversations the Italian way, 2020.
Yeah.
Some of these constituencies, like for example, let's look at Embakasi. We have Embakasi East, Embakasi West, Embakasi South. Yeah. You take less than 5 minutes from Babu's constituency to the Uri. Yeah, you may argue that these people are many and they require more MPs, but it's not quantitative assessment alone. You have to look at the quality, because in my view, Embakasi will be better served by 2 MPs, for example. And let's think of North Hor. North Hor is a constituency that has always been forgotten. I don't know why. North Hor, you take like 5 hours from one corner of the constituency to another. It's so huge. So those are the kind of questions we need to ask, as opposed to doing the politics, because you see politicians are always looking at, we need to divide these constituencies so that we have quote unquote numbers. Yeah?
It's like gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Sorts. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
Okay. I love that you clarified that too, because one of the things a lot of Kenyans feel, at least from online conversations, like every county has the potential to generate income. It has the potential to actually serve every single person. But there's also a message that's continually lost. And this is a discussion we were having with Dom around like constituencies and counties and representation. We have a situation where Kenyans believe all the 47 counties deserve to continue to exist, but the representation, like we need to get people who are competent in those positions. Do you believe that is going to change, or is it just going to create the same problem, but now with a little bit of competence?
Well, your statement presents the dilemma, the problems we have with the counties. I still believe that if Kenyans were given the statistics, the education around the need to reduce the size of government across board, we would probably fare on better, because for our generation and generations subsequent, it is an existential question for us. We need to start saving. We need to reduce our debt. We need to start living prudently. That is something that we cannot escape from. Now, in terms of our traditional bad habits, we only cascaded corruption and bad habits from the national government to the counties. The other day I was talking to some politician who was telling me that if you go to the counties, all the hotels and all the big buildings are now being tagged on people from the counties. It is true that the counties have now become the centers for devolved corruption. And we as citizens need to ask ourselves, why is it that we are incapable of getting the right people into office? I mean, I have a friend of mine who tried to contest in Kisumu a while back, a decent young man, a governor. I wanted to go for governor. He's a banker, a very sharp guy. I believe he would have done a good job. But due to the political dynamics, if you don't kiss certain people's rears and you don't have certain money to grease party mandarins, you don't get the party ticket. And you see that warp in terms of local politics, that certain tickets will be bought for a certain amount, and basically that amounts to an imposition. And that's why you see the kind of caliber of hopeless, thoughtless, and utterly decrepit persons in parliament representing us. People who can't even speak or think on behalf of the republic.
Yeah,
We have a problem.
I agree. Some of them can't even read. So that's actually a really big problem. I will not mention names. You know yourself. Okay.
You don't even have to.
Yeah, I think, Tom, you had a contention.
Yeah. So for me, it was on the whole constitution being the, I say this at a risk of overstating it, but being the end-all be-all of Kenya's future. The constitution being thrown at almost every problem that we face in the country. And I say this because as things stand right now, there are so many candidates who throw the constitution as a way to push back against government's overreach. But I feel like a lot of Kenyans get lost in that in many ways because someone said people can't eat constitutionalism, which is usually something that is thrown at people who say the constitution is to be upheld, and most people like you who know what the law says. I don't know the potential weaknesses of such arguments. I'm not speaking logically. I'm speaking politically. When it comes to 2027, the vote and further pushback for the constitution is that the government has repeatedly torn it apart and thrown it in the bin, and nothing has happened because of that. 100 people killed over 2 years. That's the best example of that. Nothing has been done when the Bill of Rights exists. I don't know. How does that look to you? Does it look like a weak argument? Does it look like a strong argument? As it stands now, for me, it's somewhere in the middle.
Well, it's not only weak, but it is what Miguna will call ignorantia elenchi. Argument that does not have any premise to stand on. For the lack of a better term, anybody who gives us such an argument is basically giving us nonsense upon stilts. For this reason, if people go back to history, we had some constitution in Germany called the Weimar Constitution, 1919. After the fall of the monarchy, Germany wants to rebrand as a republic, a constitutional republic, and people were enthusiastic about it. They brought in a constitution that had devolved government system like ours, what they call the land over there, Bill of Rights as they call progressive, all the beauties you'll expect with a constitution. Now, that constitution failed. Its lifespan was very short. And after the collapse of that constitution, the Weimar Constitution, we had Hitler. And we all know what Hitler and the monstrosity of the Third Reich to not only Germany, but the rest of the world was. In essence, we are better off served by this constitution only if we realize that the constitution not only creates institutions, but most importantly, it checks power. But when you have these half-wits you have in government and in parliament, and I see some of them opening their mouths and vomiting on our shoes every now and then, people with nothing in between their ears, essentially, you don't create statehood and create a country, a state in the manner we are trying to do by undermining the constitution. The collapse of Germany placed Germany on hiccups, and Germany was split only for it to be reunited and to rediscover the mojo with the Weimar Republic in 1990. And of course, with the American Marshall Plan, Germany has now rebranded. It's become a powerful economy. It's a net lender. It's doing fairly well. If we don't realize that states are nurtured and created by way of order, and you correctly said that a constitution is not only the text, it's a culture. We go to court, we get court orders. You show the court, the judiciary, your middle finger. You know very well that we are supposed to be appointing people of a certain caliber to public offices. You run strings around the constitution and bring in people who are utterly hopeless. We are undermining the future of Kenya, and your own children, your own relatives will be part of the mess when it implodes.
Very good answer.
Hapo mi hata sitaongeza, because one of the things that we keep hearing, especially about candidates who are trying to change that narrative, at least with I think we've seen it with Dokio Mtata, we've seen it with Maraga. The entire stance is like, we have to build a future that's built on constitutionalism and the rule of law.
Yes.
And I'll give an example of Singapore. I know you said you hate Singapore, but as new Singapore citizens who are currently suffering, I have to bring this into into this particular discussion. Singapore apparently worked because of them upholding the rule of law in whatever way that they did that. But there's a time where Singapore and Kenya were at like the same level. But Kenya is finding new ways to regress and disappear from the map of progression in any kind of way. So how do you convince an everyday person? And I know you've said this, but like, how do you convince a person to tie their constitutionalism to their own economic growth, to their own future, to their own safety and well-being? For someone who doesn't think the constitution is that much of a big deal. And don't give them the Third Reich example. You kind of have to bring it home for me.
Well, I can say this, that number one, I don't hate Singapore. I only have a problem with the example of Singapore for certain reasons. Singapore grew economically, but if you clearly look at the history of Singapore in terms of civil liberties and freedoms, that was sacrificed. And we have had a number of countries that have grown, sacrificing civil liberties and freedoms and prioritizing economics and, quote, economic growth. If you go down to the ground, questions again will be asked. What do we mean by economic growth? Because some people will give you economic growth based on GDP. If you go by those parameters, for example, you will be told that Kenya is doing quite well. We are experiencing exponential growth, 4-6%. Yet the realities on the ground are that there are a good number of us who are struggling. So we need to have a growth model that not only looks at the economic part of life, but also respects freedoms and liberties, because growth in terms of economics is not exclusive of growth in terms of civil liberties and human rights. Both can be taken together, and countries like, I'll give the example of Japan. After the fall of Imperial Japan, we saw development where human rights and the economy grew in tandem. I was going to give Indonesia, but I've seen some news out of it today. But anyway, we'll give it nonetheless. Indonesia, after the fall of Suharto, economics have been stable. liberties and reforms have been ushered in. So we can do both. It only requires some little bit of respect for your constitution and respect for a culture of constitutionalism. Yes.
I'm just seeing here actually, aside from human rights being thrown out of the window in most jurisdictions, that Singapore has a ballooning wealth inequality, which should tell you something, because the same thing has been happening in the country.
Yes.
So they sacrifice that for this country, which has the best skyscrapers in Asia and the central market for a lot of investment. Yeah, I think it makes so much sense that you have to sacrifice so much. That is the worst example to use. Doesn't this mean that, Justine, we lack imagination and we...
It always comes down to the same thing. I have been preaching this country is run by people with no imagination. And you can see in what the kind of thing that they consider growth, economic growth, because GDP does not, again, directly tie to well-being. A lot of people are falling through the cracks. If they're not dying in the streets for being shot, they're dying in their own homes because they can't get health care. They can't take their kids to school. It's very, very detrimental to your health if you can't just like get by on the day-to-day. And I personally do not believe that GDP reflects anything in the country. The US itself is a good example. We've seen like their GDP at some point was really good, but like everyday people, you will watch people in the US and there's this running joke that the US is a first world country that's wearing a Gucci belt, but it's really just like a third world country in a Gucci belt. Like that's what it is. Like they have like a consumerist culture and they have all these big superstars and everyone seems successful, but to the everyday person, you're not even in the conversation. So for me, just to tie it up, because we have to wrap up this particular segment, I think when we think about constitutionalism, we should think about like what kind of growth and prosperity we want to have as a nation. If we love the Constitution so much, we should be able to see it not just for what it can do for us right now, but what it can continue doing for us even after we've left this place. So I will give you each the last word on constitutionalism before we move to a bunch of other rule breakers after this. Tom, will you like to go first, and then we can give more?
For me, it's to reiterate what you've said, that countries and great countries and states are built by respect for rule of law and policy and deliberate steps to making prosperity something that is at the forefront of every decision that you make, whether in government or in the private sector, every single sector that you can imagine, checks and balances. But in Kenya, you see this one, lack of imagination, but then at the center of every single decision that government is making, you see them stealing from your future and your prosperity for them to maintain this glossy image of we've given 10,000 motorcycles to people, but then that money came from somewhere. And what makes me even more upset is that the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, said that it would, I don't even know why this cost exists, because that it would take 18 billion to maintain constitutionalism in government. That should have been a cost you spent without even declaring.
Yes.
Which then makes me ask myself, Justine, are you then not implementing the Constitution? Because what he said is this money could be better used elsewhere. For once, the guy thought of healthcare being the most important thing in the country, because he's saying, what if we put this 18 billion instead of implementing the Constitution in all our policy making into healthcare? Can you imagine what that would do? But then the question is, instead of pouring 144 billion into Talanta Stadium, why don't you invest 100 billion into healthcare? That makes more sense.
Priorities.
Just doesn't make sense to me. Every single thing they say on stage and do never makes sense to me.
Yeah. Evans?
I want to pose a challenge to us. And I watch a lot of Nat Geo animal shows. All animals, and I want you to watch this, they always go for the strongest to lead. If you show signs of weakness, you always jettisoned out of the pack, because you, as a weak leader of the pack, you will not be able to lead the charge in terms of defending. it's a very important lesson for us Homo sapiens. We need to look at the very best among us to lead. We cannot go for people who lack cerebral matter in between their ears to lead us. People who cannot think and people who think that primitive accumulation and gobbling of public resources as a quick reach mechanisms for them personally will be a path for us as a country. That's going to be a problem. And then we also have to trace our roots as Africans, because we are Africans. We have something that the South Africans tried and is still reverberating within that circle called Ubuntu. In Africa, in Kenya, we call it Utu. And Utu has its different dimensions within our different communities. It's found in the message of Jesus. Love yourself, love your brother as you love yourself. You cannot steal from SHA. You cannot steal from public coffers. I still think you love yourself. Because when you steal from those poor Kenyans, tomorrow you'll be out of office. You'll need to go to Kenyatta. If you stole from Kenyatta, where are those resources to treat you when you need? Those resources to treat your brother, your sister, your neighbor. We need to start thinking of the enterprise of state, not looking at it shallowly in terms of the 5-year cycles that politicians here think in terms of the country, but think progressively in terms of grander visions for the country. Yes.
10 over 10, no notes. Just to wrap up in like how the rule of law is also just still being completely disobeyed. We saw the Kericho governor, one Mr. Mutai, who was in the impeachment process. He was being impeached under several like nazumi njuni mingi, so like gross violation of the constitution and any other law. So he apparently committed crimes under the national and international law. Like he was just like spreading his wings and illegaling all the way. And then we have abuse of office and physical and mental incapacity to perform duties in office. And on top of this, he also like sexually assaulted people in his county. And the process of impeachment did not succeed because they didn't have 2/3 of the members to be able to actually vote like for the impeachment to be successful. And I just want to ask what the impeachment process is, and also how does someone with such gross misconduct is not taken out because of a technicality?
Wow. The impeachment process has historical traces. I will not go through the history. I remember writing about it a while back when one of my senior friends tried to say that impeachment should not happen, at least for governors, for reasons he tried to converse, and I disagreed with him. If you look at the old Roman Empire, traditional African societies, impeachment was a facility or capacity to protect the office. That the office is greater than you, the person, and it has to remain with some integrity. If you look at countries where people think, like we've had examples in the West. I remember watching this video of a minister in the UK who came into Prime Minister's question time by 5 minutes late. He resigned on the floor of Parliament. Said, I've let down the Prime Minister, I've let down the country, I'm resigning. This German minister who had plagiarized, basically used material in his thesis without referencing. He resigned from Angela Merkel's government.
Yeah.
The capacity of shame. In Japan, we have had politicians who were caught in all manner of infractions. Mistresses pilfering a few coins here and there. And in Japan, it's more drastic. The shame, the ignominy, they commit what we call harakiri. You will literally bust open your bowels and commit suicide. The capacity of shame. That is something that we don't have in this country.
Come back, shame.
We don't have shame.
Yeah.
I mean, you sexually assault. I mean, look at Parliament, and I'm saying things that are in public domain. We have somebody that was seen on TV drawing his gun and shoot someone.
Yes.
He's in Parliament today. We've had somebody in there whose charges were withdrawn, and it basically done what? Molested a minor.
Yes.
These people have atrocious scandals. And the problem is, and the judiciary has to take a sting for this as well. There are two decisions that were decided by the courts. The International Center for Policy case, and perhaps to some extent Mumu Matemo. These decisions are horrible in terms of what they portend for the morality of the Constitution. And again, of course, those two vices I spoke about, corruption and our bad culture of politics, where people have no capacity for shame. You are stupid, you do wrong things, but you still rub it on our face. Sometimes I stopped watching some of these characters on TV for purposes of my mental health, because number one, I don't like stupid people. And then number two, the lack of shame. And people think that this is normal. You cannot do what, and my good friend, my senior, Elisha Ngoya, presented very graphic images of the graft in Kericho. And it's not Kericho alone. If you go to all these counties, the other day we had Wajir. Nairobi is also boiling here. We have to ask ourselves, why is it that people get into public office, do all these evil things, and have no capacity for shame?
Why do you think? Why do you think they do that?
Well, I remember this Kenyan who was on TV during the last election, and when a certain candidate was called a thief, and what did this Kenyan say? Tutampigia kura. Hata tukimpigia kura ni mwizi wetu. So we are owning these vices. And when we own these vices and these vile, wretched people, it comes back to bite us. I was born in Nairobi, born and raised. By accidental origin, my father comes from Kisumu. So by the fact that my name starts with an O, I am expected to reason and think in a certain way. And that should reflect even in my electoral choices. And that's the mistake we do. Right now, people are getting excited about, I saw some people from some corner of the country calling it Pierre. It's Pyre, my people. That old relic that was built by the Romans in 2000 BC. And people are getting excited. It's in a lake shore. And we are getting excited that some stone Roman relic that was witnessed in the Roman and Greek civilizations in 2000 BC. You need to ask yourself, how much did it cost to build that thing? Should that be a priority, or should health and education be a priority? Do we have a proper audit in terms of the cost? The other day we had a state lodge being built in Homa Bay and Kisii. are just next to each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why should we build a lodge in Kisii, a lodge in Homo Bay, yet we have a state house in Kisumu?
Yes.
We don't even use these things.
Yeah.
Let's go to the US. The US has 3 official residences. We have Camp David, White House, and the transitional building in Washington. Those are 3 maintained by the state. What is, in terms of GDP, what is the size of the US economy?
It's huge.
Okay.
We're joking.
Yeah.
We are joking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're joking.
And then on top of that, buy him a helicopter.
But a good thing about like the US right now, they're also getting like the Kenya treatment.
Yeah.
They were renovating the White House. They're putting gold statues. So soon they'll be just like us, you know, like.
They're having UFC in the.
Yes, they're having a UFC match. It's just, I think the circus is coming to everyone, because I think there's a level of what governance is and how you contribute to your own prosperity that is lost. And I think, as you said, the lack of shame contributes very, very hugely to how we operate as people. And that ends up, it's a cycle of, I like to call it like a human centipede of sorts, of like, of self-deprecation. Yeah, that's how I view it.
Cut your coat according to your cloth.
Yes.
You cannot live and posture opulence when we are struggling. Is it a priority to, quote unquote, renovate State House now? To build all these lodges? We need to cut down on expenses. How many advisors do we have in government right now?
100. How many are there?
That's just not many.
Yeah.
Yet, under the Constitution, primary advice should come from the cabinet.
Yes.
We are not serious.
Yes.
Okay. Just so we can wrap up on like how this impeachment process is like such a magnification of how devolved corruption is working, rule of law is being dismissed. How do we make sure that there's justice, even with an issue that feels very like someone is getting off on a technicality? Because with this governor, this is his second impeachment, and he has just weaseled through like, how do we make sure the people of Kericho get justice?
People of Kericho have to ask themselves the hard question. They have their vote. Should we bring back this governor again? And again, it also, the same question has to be asked of us in Nairobi. We have not forgotten about Sakaja and all these questions being asked of his administration.
And Muthiria's dustbins.
And including this issue with the county, quote unquote, subsidized food feeding program,
Yes.
school feeding program. I don't think Sakaja was born in Nairobi. He's somebody who came into Nairobi. Some of us were born in Nairobi. We have more authority to speak about Nairobi affairs because we were born and raised there. The city cannot go down the dogs. You can see the filth on the street, around all these streets, Kilelesho, Kilimani, Tagari, people are being attacked in broad daylight. The other day, we had this young man, 16-year-old, killed by a gang in the middle of the day in Umoja. Cooperation that should be there between the county authorities and the National Police Service, no longer there. So we need to really ask ourselves as citizens, as residents of these respective counties, are we going to go on this way? Are we going to be mesmerized by these cheap, dross, hopeless videos that these half-wits we call politicians post on social media? People who have nothing. They like posturing, sending short clips, and this army of fellas they use on social media. What are they called?
Bots.
No. These fellas,
Trolls.
not trolls, but they call them influencers,
Okay.
bloggers,
Yes, bloggers.
to send their stupid messages. We need to think. The future of this country is at stake. We are sitting on the crossroads.
That's a great way to wrap that up.
Yeah.
So, Tom, we have some public participation coming up,
Yes.
just so to make sure that we, even in the whole
Yeah.
circus that we're still living in, like what's something that we should be looking forward to publicly participate and contribute to in this coming month?
So it's basically the thing that everyone has been waiting for, continuous voter registration, CVR. It's something we've spoken about so many times on this show. For my BC commissioners, that was done, albeit under circumstances that people will say that are not expected, or what you'd expect of a democracy like ours. But I'm curious to hear what you think after I say this. This will be short. Continuous voter registration started on September 29th, according to the Independent Electoral and Borders Commission. What this means is that you can now register as a voter, change your polling station, or confirm your existence in the voter registry. Well, this is out and so many centers, but where to register, it says that you may register at any IEBC constituency office, except in areas currently with by-elections. I think that's to maintain the voter count in comparison to the last election in 2022. So nothing changes there. But once that's done, services will be available, including new voter registration, transfer of voter registration to a new location, correction or update of voter details, and inspection of voter registration status. So basically now you can vote, you can register to be a voter for 2027, 2 years before the fact. Evans, do you, over the past few months, I want you to answer this briefly because we're winding up, do you read any mischief in the behavior of IEBC and the commissioners, the delay of the continual voter registration updating, or whatever you want to call it?
Well, this is not a fault of their own. They only came in the other day. IEBC has a lot of problems, including certain constituencies that we have about, I think, 10 or so, or more constituencies that are supposed to cease to exist in the next election, including Daragwa and several others. That's the greatest headache. And we did not also do the delimitation exercise that was expected to have been completed last year. That's another headache. I don't know how we are going to vote without the boundary delimitation exercise, and certainly how these constituencies that will cease to exist will be accommodated in law. It's going to be a difficult exercise. Where we need to keep focus as citizens, and I don't know if people remember this, people who watched the last presidential petition in court, my brother, my good friend Willis Otieno, talking of somebody in the bathroom, a voyeur, having access to IEBC systems. Willis was just giving us drama and dramatic expression about the problems with the ICT component in IEBC. That has not been dealt with. We have a KPMG audit report that exposed a lot of rot within the ICT components of the IEBC. That has not been dealt with. To the best of my knowledge, they have not come out in the open to tell us that we have managed to address the issues that were highlighted by KPMG. So as a voter, I don't have the confidence that I'm going to go to a vote that is free, fair, and accountable.
Okay.
So wait, when did?
That I feel like Kenyans, we need to be vigilant. We really need to be vigilant, because I was just gonna try and like draw this country, like this particular conversation about this country, our constitution, constitutionalism, and just the rule of law. Because every single time we've seen the president on TV, he's like, oh, I really go to Japan and I'm inspired. And I'm like, calm down. First of all, you are the president of this country. Like, why are you gallivanting? Secondly, being like Singapore is not supposed to be a dream you have. Personally, I believe you have to have your own dream. You live in Africa. You have people here who are absolutely brilliant. From people whose work in Karura is now at stake, and like the history of, because like Karura has been preserved greatly by communities. Whether like we are having issues with predatory extraction of money from the people who go there and the institutions that run it, that's a different conversation. But like the communities are the ones that have kept Karura alive. Removing the resources that they need to continue doing that is detrimental to the future of Kenya. Having a tarmac road in somewhere that's supposed to be a sanctuary, at least in this particular city, that Nikama green spaces are under attack, and like it's like the soul of this country is like it can't be green, it has to be cabro. Like you have to really be afraid of like what Kenya is gonna look like. So instead of telling us about how Kenya should be like Singapore, we need a leadership that thinks of us. We need a leadership that thinks about Kenyans, with Kenyans, using the resources that we have. There's a wealth of information and intelligence and just creativity that is in this country. People are building stuff for Meta. People are building stuff for, what is Elon Musk's company? Like the big Gen AI, like all this open AI. It's like a lot of extraction happens in this country, but nothing is poured back into, not monetarily, not even just like, even a tree. Like even as a pedestrian, you're not safe. I try to cross roads anywhere in this country, and I'm just, in these counties particularly, and I'm very stressed. So if you can't see people for the everyday person that they are and how much they need to be safe and protected and invested in, you're not going to build any new Singapore. Yeah. You don't build anything by bringing people from outside. You have to invest in the people that are here. And upholding the Constitution is not people begging you to do that. You have to do that because it is required by it. And if you can't, by the way, pia kutoka kwa hiyo seat si ngumu. So I would like us to wrap. I think I'll give Evans the last word, but like that, mi nimesema yangu, so.
No, please, Evans.
Okay. Wewe, hauna maoni?
Mimi, sina maoni. If I speak, I'll be in trouble.
Okay, Evans.
Well, Kenyans, we have a good pool of minds, at least in terms of citizens. But the disconnect is usually up here, where those up here do not necessarily represent the face of the ordinary citizen. We have to address that by taking charge of the electoral process and use the platform that is public participation in terms of being active citizens. We also have to do our bit in terms of addressing the issue of corruption. We also have to do a bit in terms of addressing the issue of bad political culture. When you take that 200, 500 shillings to accept to be a quote-unquote goon and to participate in all these evils on behalf of these politicians, you are not only risking your future, but the future of your children and the country. The future of this country is contingent to what we do as individuals and collectively as a country. We can make this country better, and this country can only be better if we respect the Constitution and we embrace the culture of constitutionalism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evans. I think that's a great place to end. I would like to thank Evans for being our guest today and for really, really rooting for the Constitution. And of course, my co-host.
We're always rooting for the Constitution.
Yes. And I'm Justine Wanda. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.